Howdy, all of you delicious people. I'm here today to review Rugrats Season 1, Episodes 1 through 3. So, dog food? That's what you think of me? How dare you give me a show that I thoroughly enjoyed and could go and gush about how I was to have remembered and fell back in love with. Just that intro alone, I could just watch on a loop and just be like, why do I even need to watch this show? I can just watch the intro and just about that. There, besides the intro that I remember just like from second to second, Stu being an inventor was a thing that I remembered. I was like, oh yeah, like he is an inventor in the show. And Dee Dee, like, I remember the words Lipschitz, but I didn't really connect it to this show for some other reason. I think there was probably some other like Saturday Night Live thing that I connected that to. But yeah, like Lipschitz, I was like, oh my god, like that was a thing in this show. Then of course you have the just iconic looking characters that have their own certain things about them. So I'm gonna probably be at some point very biased about what out of these 3 episodes were my favorite episodes, because it's the whole going to the movies thing was easily swayed by me. But yeah, I love the adventure of this show. I like the fact that, yeah, like you do have some very odd ideas and some goofy things going on, especially by the very tail end of these 3 episodes. There's just some weird, goofy things going on. But this show was to try and appeal to a certain audience, so give it that. In all honesty, I wasn't to have been the one to have originally watched this show. I feel that my sister was to have been the one that really watched this show, and I was just like, oh, okay, well, I'll just kind of watch this because she's watching it. And then I actually did start to enjoy it. Because much more of like a Guts or Legends of the Hidden Temple guy, or really just also any number of projects that eventually I saw, like Bump in the Night or Are You Afraid of the Dark, and all these just kind of projects that Nickelodeon did have, and I'm re-going back into it just to reconnect with all of them, I would hope. Logically, I'd hope a lot of people are to enjoy this kind of stuff. But so anyways, Rugrats just had 9 seasons. Oh my god. And then on top of that, it has like a CGI season, it seems. What was going on with that? Don't know. But I do know that Rugrats also had a movie that I went and I think maybe in theaters saw. Don't remember. Don't have that good of memory. But yeah, so for me, tying into Rugrats as well as just kind of Nickelodeon in general, I am to go on and state that I am to be a person that lives in Minnesota, and I was to have at one point, years ago, but still it counts, to have gone to the Mall of America. Yeah, like, we don't have in this state, but we do have the Mall of America. That's the only real key thing that we can just tout about that we have. But legitimately, I'm sure that there's better malls or there's better places that you can go and get memorabilia or merchandise things. Comic-Con straight up. But still. Mall of America, they had switched from being Camp Snoopy to having like a Nickelodeon theme. And when I was there, the last time I was there, I'm kicking myself now, because I legitimately didn't like think about it then, but I am thinking about it now, how I could have gone there and gotten like Rugrats plushies and all kinds of other like Nickelodeon merchandise, but like at that time was not thinking about it because like I was going on and going through the Mall of America, like going and looking at all of this stuff and really didn't buy anything because I was such a cheapskate at that time, probably still am. Uh, hey, can you give me something for free? No. Like, can I just buy the cheapest looking thing? Because yeah, uh, I was like so just penny pinching, um, like I had kind of done very much in my youth, just kind of collecting random pennies together and just like hoping to just get $1 out of that, so I can figure out like, okay, with $1, what could I get? Oh, a pop, good enough. And then eventually I'd get enough dollars together to buy like one action figure when I was a kid, and I'd have these stacks of pennies that would just kind of present to these people, and they'd be like, "Really?" Like, yeah, I'm that guy. So, but yeah, like if you haven't gone ever to the Mall of America, like maybe it's time to make that trip, just so you can go on and just uh, like finally get to just check it out, and more than likely have me know that you went there. Because heaven forbid I'd be able to actually legitimately, yeah, let's just blow money that you have, and I'll be there, and I'll know that you did that. Uh, buy all the Nickelodeon stuff, get it all. But anyways, going into these 3 episodes, we would come into the very first pilot episode having Tommy looking like a Super Mario Brothers. He's like wearing a red shirt, and then he wears these blue overalls. I'm like, Mario Brothers. And bizarrely, they just decided to just completely change the way that Tommy looks after the pilot. I guess figuring out that all the other characters like had like their own individual design, that Tommy just needs like a baby blue shirt and that's good enough. I think they were trying to figure out a way to make him look different compared to all the other characters, because Chucky has like his own kind of baby blue shirt. So I think they're like trying to figure things out. But so that very first pilot episode has this like full length episode trying to like bring in all of these characters that later on just kind of randomly come in and get involved in the show. But it also seems that there is a pattern or things that emerge within the show. And some of them I did remember, and some of them were just like, oh my god, like, I guess this is just a running gag. We have like Grandpa Lou, who's like, I used to walk 15 miles. That person used to be really good at their job, and they would walk 15 miles to get there. Just consistently talking like this. And so the things that I remembered was like Stu being an inventor. I'm like, oh yeah, that's right. He had the whole like the Pickles toys thing, and Dee Dee was so much like devoted to this whole Lipschitz thing and would need these books to figure out her children and figure out like what to do. And I was like, oh my god, like, so that's where Lipschitz comes from. Like, I remember the name, but I didn't connect where it like ever came from until rewatching the show. I was so surprised by it. But so some people will probably go on into Rugrats and probably have their favorite character. I think out of all of them, like, I really liked all of the characters quite easily. There wasn't legitimately, I think, one favorite. Maybe I was a Tommy guy. Um, Angelica, I think, was one that I didn't like at all, but I think over the years I probably warmed up to the character because they just kind of softened her up at some points. Uh, but then also, rewatching it now, like, I much more get why they have that character and really actually like her now. She's not one of my favorites. It's still probably like, uh, it's still probably Tommy more so than anything else. But like Angelica, like I do like her. But so after the first pilot episode, we start to break down the episodes into two parts. So I'm like, oh well, okay. Like it seems that seems to be the pattern of which that these things kind of go into with these two parters. And like I obviously have a bias of that movie episode just kind of being like the overall favorite because I'm just biased. But there is some other things just kind of going on that I feel is really fun. Like Stu having to go on and kind of pitch to this one guy while Tommy is just kind of going into back rooms of this restaurant and kind of fumbling around, like as if he's Mrs. Doubtfire. So we would, of course, eventually like showcase kind of these random-ish like characters, but then of course, like earlier on, I didn't realize that they were to have also showcased Reptar so early, like the Godzilla-ish like character that became like such a iconic thing, as well as the characters, which is just kind of fun to realize like how early that was in the show and how a lot of people just thoroughly latched onto that as well as also latched onto the other characters. So with that, yeah, like all of these episodes I think were to be great. I feel every one of them, like I don't I you could probably kind of back and forth to just like okay, like this might have felt like a filler here or uh, a goofy idea there. Like obviously the pilot episode with the whole dog food thing was just kind of very like okay, this is a weird thing to just kind of toss in here, but like I can understand why they did it. It's the weird fun of it all to just kind of put something drastically different out there to uh to possibly have Nickelodeon just be like, okay, like we just need to like buy this uh because Muppets are doing Muppet Babies, so we need to just have a babies show. So with that said, yeah, kind of going into bits and pieces of these episodes, but really I feel that I'm going to save a lot of this up for actual spoilers. Let me know in the comments below what you felt about Rugrats, if you really thoroughly enjoy this show, or if you went back into it and you're just like, man, this show is too goofy for me. Especially within that third episode where we go on and we have Tommy who gets sick, and all of a sudden all these weird, goofy visuals are just being popped up within this episode. I'm like, what the heck is going on? Especially with Angelica, how she looks in that third episode. It's kind of a little weird, off-putting maybe, but still. Uh, yeah, like this is great. Really enjoyed it. Really loved it. Uh, Also, this was to have been a community choice, regardless of it probably also being tied to Muppets and Muppet Babies, which I'm not quite sure exactly where to narrow that down. Um, More than likely, I'm going to go into the original Muppet Babies show because luckily I can watch the first three episodes and see where that takes me. The Muppet stuff, like I have no qualms about rechecking into that. If it seems that the Muppets things are to actually seemingly be popular, I will definitely re-go and check those out. There is so much of these certain kind of things that have like this massive, like longevous things that I didn't even realize that they actually had. And if it seems that logically people are to be massively into them, then like I will check them all out. But it's all about also like figuring out what is to actually have been the most popular thing also within whatever uh, thing is to be attached with all of this stuff because there's so much of it. But anyways, let's go on and let's go into spoiler time and go into these episodes kind of thoroughly more in depth. Other than that, I feel that I can go on and just get into spoiler time because legitimately I don't feel like there's anything else that I need to just kind of notate or just kind of quickly tee up this episode because it's all about babies going into these wild adventures and having like one key thing that they need to focus on of why they eventually need to go into these adventures. Like in one of the episodes, like a ball goes into a neighbor's yard, and so the babies have to go on and figure out a way to make their way to get back that ball, and there ends up being like a dog uh, kind of tied into one of the neighbors' homes, and so like there's a whole thing about that, and I think it also ties into like the 4th of July. But so we'll get into the episodes much more, and I'll have a better memory of how that all plays out, I'd hope. But anyways, let's get into spoiler time because it's about that time yet again. It's spoiler time. It's about that time again to spoil these episodes. I'm of course going to pause this review, get out everything that I'm to have as far as either character list because I don't have a cast list because this is an animated thing. And man, looking at the character list of this show, like it was just scroll forever and figure out if these characters were to have legitimately been shown on some freaking thing somewhere. Because I'm like, man, like this show went on for 9 seasons, and I'm just like, man, this is crazy. I could just imagine what I'm going to go into, like heavy, iconic shows and things because, like, I haven't even scratched the surface of uh like stuff like Star Treks or like bigger IPs that at some point I'll probably go on and ask a folk or two like what exactly they want to go on and see through that because I feel at some point I'm probably going to forget all this. But anyways, let's go into it. I'm going to pause here. We'll get into these episodes. Okay, so the very first episode is to be Tommy's first birthday. By the way, also, I was wearing sunglasses, not to look cool. If you've gone on to see a number of other reviews, from time to time I'll wear sunglasses just because of tension headaches. But it seems like I'm feeling a little bit better now. So legit, I just decided to just go like, okay, hopefully I can do the rest of this without getting any more headaches. But so the beginning of this, we'd have Tommy waking up to both Stu and Dee Dee having a happy birthday sign over Tommy's crib, like, hey, champ, like, happy birthday, buddy. So, both Stu and Dee Dee are looking at Tommy and they're thinking about his birthday, and Stu is just so, like, so driven into like talking about his prototype hoverround and or hoverama, and he's listing off every bit and piece that this toy is to like have about it, where it's like, oh man, just the batteries alone. So Dee Dee is going on to be like, oh yeah, well that's fine and nice. It's like, well, hey, like let's change Tommy's diaper and let's go on and let's feed him. So Stu and Dee Dee go to take Tommy to his high chair to get some food in him that looks very much like doo-doo. So both Stu and Dee Dee are looking through the book of Lipschitz, and they're going on to look at this birthday kind of checklist, and Tommy is to take the pen from Stu, and he's like putting it in his mouth and just kind of chewing on it a little bit, and then he puts the pen back uh, into Stu's coat. So Dee Dee ends up giving Stu this spoon that looks like this rocket ship. So it's to be a disguise of sorts to be like, hey, this isn't just some like spoon. It's to be like a rocket ship that Tommy is going to be playing around with and opening his mouth so they can put the food into him. And Stu takes this duck and he's like, well, how about I play with this duck? And Dee Dee's like, yeah, no, like I don't think we should like bring in decoys with this. So we have Grandpa Lou that is talking about uh, the inevitable puppet show that it seems that both the parents are planning for this birthday party. And Dee Dee ends up bringing a magazine right to Grandpa Lou's face. It's like, well, yeah, like, well, this is to obviously be the best thing to give to young kids, and so Grandpa Lou is just like, oh, okay, well, uh, like whatever you say. So Tommy all of a sudden gets distracted by this commercial about this uh, Rusty's Choice or Husky's Choice or something along those lines. Some kind of weird, bizarrish dog food that is to state that like this dog can jump higher and this and that. And Tommy's looking at this and like, oh, and so Dee Dee is telling Stu, it's like, hey, like since his mouth is open, put the food in it now. Put the food in his mouth now. So Stu tries to put the food in the mouth just to get it splashed back upon him. He's like, oh my god, this is my favorite shirt. Bizarrely, Stu like has like favorite clothing of all kinds. He's like, oh my god, this is my favorite shirt. This is my favorite tie. This is my favorite freaking underwear. I don't know. Like, I'm sure it'll probably come up at some point. So Tommy is to take this screwdriver from underneath his little high chair to undo his high chair, get off of his high chair, and notice that Spike, his dog, is getting some food. So Tommy wants to take some of that food from him to end up understanding exactly uh, what the commercial had gone on to tell him. So Tommy's crawling, making his way, and all of a sudden, Grandpa Lou is to grab Tommy and just be like, "Oh no, kid! Like, you definitely don't want to eat any of that stuff." Then he turns around and looks at the food that Tommy is actually eating. It's like, oh, okay, well, like it looks the exact freaking same. So there's a jingle jangle at the door, and we'd showcase both Betty and Howard, and they are to, of course, be parents of Phil and Lil, but then also like Betty and Howard, it seems are also to have like Chucky with them, and so like right away we're getting barely anything of actually Chucky's parents. But hey, like the fewer people that are on this show, the better. In all honesty, the smaller that this cast is, like the better I feel because I'm just like, man, I have to like dance around and figure out who all of these people are or remember who they all are. But so Betty is stating that her husband is just very much overwhelmed already with just simply having the twins there, but then there is also to just be Chucky, and she's like, well, okay, well, like, hey, you had to have all these kids with you. So Chucky and the rest of the rest of the kids all make their way to meet up with Tommy, who is to be just kind of around this kind of child-proof uh, like gate thing. So Betty ends up meeting up with Grandpa Lou and is asking like, well, hey, like where did Stu disappear off to? And Grandpa Lou is just like, oh, like, well, like he's going on and he's tinkering with his this the Hooverama. And believe you me, like if you don't know a lick about what he's talking about, he'll make sure that you know every bit about it. So Stu goes on to be tinkering with the Hooverama within the basement. So we have the parents kind of watching their kids, and Betty and Howard realize that Spike is destroying this teddy bear out in the backyard. And so Dee Dee's like, oh my god, oh yeah. Like, so she runs after to try to get the teddy bear. So while that's going on, we have Tommy who turns to the rest of the kids and it's like, hey, like, I got one word for you, and it's dog food. And they're just like, dog food? What? And he's like, yeah, like, dog food? Yeah, like, I wanted to try and get some earlier, but, like, but my grandpa, like, kind of blocked me from it. But yeah, like, we gotta get to this dog food. Because we're gonna turn into dogs. And, like, what, like, better thing to go on and do? Like, we're gonna be, like, we're gonna be able to turn into dogs as if this is some weird kind of Ghostbusters thing from the Keymaster and Gatekeeper Terror Dog thing. But so, like, at first we have characters like Chucky that is just like, well, like, what if we get like fleas and this and that, and we have Lil that's just like fleas, like that sounds awesome. So the more and more that they talk about how they can eventually go on to become dogs and lick people, or like when Angelica comes in, she mentions that they're going to possibly bite the mailman. So these kids are on board for whatever goofy reason about becoming dogs, oddly enough. So they're watching on as like Grandpa Lou is like just playing with this dog. So the kids all start to get these birthday hats to be put upon their head. And we have Betty and we have, I think, Dee Dee talking about how they're only going to have the hats for like 3 minutes. I'm like, yeah, like any young kid, like you want them to have like these hats on and they always take them off. Especially just kind of dealing with certain youth within my time. Yeah, like uh, I'm sure that's probably like having a dog, giving them some kind of like clothing also, so that way they get warm and they always just take it off. So the kids are to be aware through family members that Angelica is coming, and they're like, Angelica? Oh no, we don't want Angelica here. Setting up this character to a T of like, okay, this is going to be a nemesis like character. So Angelica is to be in the back of this car, just kind of in this kind of a certain kind of protective seat like thing, talking to Drew about going into this party. So Drew and Angelica make it to the door as Stu is wrapping up the massive uh, Hooverama gift. So, bizarrely, instead of just Stu coming to the door like a natural person, he ends up getting like a weird mechanism that tells him that somebody's at the door. And so he goes to this kind of very large computer screen, and he has this like camera thing going on to talk to Drew through this. And so yeah, so we have this like bizarrish interaction that leads to like, okay, uh people going into the door. Stu makes it to the door is to just mention how Angelica is just such a beautiful kid, and this and that, just being all cordial and nice. So Angelica gets put into the like kind of just safety uh gate thing like all the other kids, and Angelica is to grab on to both Tommy and Chucky and just kind of like, yeah, look at me, I'm the good kid, even though logically she's a terror. So Tommy then has to like pitch this whole idea to Angelica about like, well, yeah, we gotta like, the key word is dog food for the day, and we gotta get this dog. We gotta figure out how to get it. And Angelica's like, well, yeah, like I think like if I become a dog, like I can bite the mailman's. Yeah, like I'm in. So so they have this plan. So they're drawing this whole thing out with pink and blue uh colors. It seems they're mapping this out. Oh well, Spike is just kind of looking at this cake, just like, if I can just jump on that cake, just eat it, because of course pets like, especially now, like I have a cat that just, whenever you're to have food, like the cat is just like right there. She's just like, how can I go on and just like get a nibble of whatever you're eating? It's like, kind of, just go away. I'm eating. Like I'm not gonna give any piece of this to you. Um, but I don't know what it is. Like this cat just meow 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 all the freaking time, and then also like whenever you have food, she's just there. She just sneaks up on you all the time. But so both Betty and Dee Dee are talking, and Dee Dee is just so worried about this whole like puppet show thing coming, and she's like, "Oh my god!" Like all the time, she's just naturally going into like, "Oh my god, this birthday is gonna get ruined if I don't have this puppet show, and I don't have this, and I don't have that." So Dee Dee is to go on and be so worried, but then there's a ding dong at the door, and if it not is to actually be the puppet show, is to actually be Grandma and Grandpa, both Grandpa Boris and Minka, whoever these characters are to seemingly be, because after this, they're not on the show after these other episodes, but they're the grandparents on Dee Dee's side. So they come in, they're kissing Tommy up a storm, and like just kind of being within the show for whatever things are to go on and just talk about here. So Stu is to kind of bring up like, hey man, like let's unwrap all these presents with all these people just kind of around. So Angelica is to want to talk to the babies, or specifically Tommy, and it's like, well, hey, like I do realize it's your birthday, but hey, like since I'm here, I want first dibs on all the presents. So I'm like, really? Like, so this girl is to want to just kind of take all the presents and play around with them, even though it's actually Tommy's birthday. So Tommy goes on. Well, he doesn't exactly unwrap it, but pretty dang close. So the first thing that they end up unwrapping comes from Drew, and it's the fire truck. And so Tommy is just kind of looking at it, and Stu ends up talking to Drew. Is like, well, hey, like, why'd you give him a fire truck? Like, that doesn't really look all that like really pleasing to like, it's not as good as my gift kind of thing. So Stu, of course, is all excited and he wants to unwrap his gift. So he then goes on to unwrap it. And we have like Grandpa Lou that is telling Stu, it's like, I don't think he's going to go on and be able to even like play with that. It seems that he's not young enough, he's not old enough uh, to really have that kind of gadget. And so, like, we at some point realized that like this hover Rama thing is just so dangerous for a young kid because this thing is like a flying saucer. Like this is like a droid. Like you have like this thing like flying up and down and what, like I know that you could probably go on and have the kid just kind of have like the controls of it, but I'm like, yeah, like this thing just doesn't look safe for a kid. But then next, Howard ends up wrapping his present, and it's to be baby talkies, and that gets all the guys like just intrigued about these baby talkies, and so they take it out in the back and they start playing around with it. And so Betty and Dee Dee at one point are saying like, "Well, I guess the guys are really happy about this gift." And like Howard's talking about how it has like 15 different channels and all these things to it, and they're just like, "Oh yeah, like all right." So like these walkie talkies like were just the bang of the party. So Tommy again tries to go for Spike's bowl of food, and we end up getting him blocked again when Dee Dee comes in there and is to take Tommy and is to bring him back with all the other, or no, like she grabs him and Tommy starts crying, and Dee Dee is to try to figure out a way to just kind of console Tommy while also answering the door. And come to find out, the people that answer the door are these kind of truck delivery guys, these movers, and they bring the puppet show. The only thing is, like, there's nobody that is actually doing the puppet show. It just seems that like the movers are just like, hey man, I'm bringing this thing in, like you paid for it. So Dee Dee is left with having to figure out who's going to be the person to put together this whole puppet show. So the guys start to put their heads together, and Stu and Drew think that they can kind of put this puppet show together. So they end up going on and doing so. So everybody just starts to gather around here, and bizarrely, it seems that the puppet show ends up being like this Little Red Riding Hood thing, and it's to be the very later half of this story. So we have the what the big like what big eyes that you have, better to see you with, what uh like big nose that you have, and Drew goes on and does his own little rendition, and then Stu is like, hey, like you should have said it this way. And then all of a sudden just becomes a very therapeutic thing between the two of the brothers, where they talk about like this toy that they destroyed when they were 4, and Dee Dee has to kind of go on and kind of break up between the two of them, and like they're still doing it with these puppets, like this whole rigmarole of all this. But yeah, like just becomes very bizarre for a lot of people. Like were like, hey, like I guess this was all well and good. So while that's going on, we have Tommy trying to make it back to uh, the dog bowl, to find out that this is to all be for naught as the dog bowl is empty. So then they have to realize where another can of dog food is. So that forces Tommy and all the rest of the young kids to kind of stack together. Like, I think it's just Tommy and Angelica who are kind of just stacked together here, like one kind of on top of the other. And so Tommy's desperately trying to reach for this can of dog food, and Chucky and Phil and Lil go to find the hoverama and the remote to it, and so they're flying this thing into, hoping that they can figure out a way to knock this thing down or get the hoverama to drop the can on top of it, which that's what it technically does. But a problem arises. The hoverama gets so close to Tommy that it ends up just kind of hooking Tommy, and so Tommy starts flying around with this little antenna hooking Tommy. Angelica falls, and she falls into this flower, and so now she's just like white as a sheet. So Tommy's consistently flying around until at some point, like, the antenna breaks and he falls right on Spike. And so Dee Dee is going on to figure out a way to just therapeutically talk to both Dew and Stu. Man, was that just a weird choice to just have two brothers that just have rhyming names. But I guess it's like, hey man, we didn't really think about the names. We're just going on and really caring about the babies more so than anything. So the Hoverama eventually collides right into the cake, and they're like, oh my god, the cake is ruined. But still, after Stu goes on and takes the Hoverama, it's like, oh my god, my invention. And we have the two grandparents that are just like who has like carrot cake for a birthday? Like, obviously you should have had chocolate. So Grandpa Lou finds the dog food, and so he opens it and he hands it off to Spike. But then while like everyone else isn't looking, the babies all go on, or the young kids with Angelica, they all go on to like look at the bowl, and they like grab some for themselves and they start eating it, and they're like, oh yuck, pleh, pleh. They all spit it out. But then like, well, like, are we gonna become dogs now? And like Tommy as well as the other kids just start to pretend to be dogs, and all of the parents are to just kind of look at this and just being like, you know what, like this is all good and fun. Like, at least these kids just found something fun about this birthday party. So they decide to take a picture of this moment and get all together. And then at some point, this just becomes the Pickles family album. So it's like, well, hey, like, if this pilot show would have never gone anywhere, at least it would have been this one episode. But luckily, this show just had a huge shelf life. So the following two-parter episode, the first part of it is to be the barbecue story, because we have this kind of grilling thing going on. So the very beginning of this is to kind of show this outdoorsy like thing with all these bugs. Tommy ends up grabbing one of the beetles, and he's to kind of have it in his hand, and then he's almost going to eat it. And Dee Dee's like, "No, don't eat that. You don't know where it's from. You don't know what illnesses it has on it." So grandparents are going on and talking to one another. Again, Grandpa Lou brings up the 15 miles. I used to walk for 15 miles. That's all he has to say in every bit of these episodes. It's the running joke that I think may continue to work, but then again, it kind of gets repetitive at a certain point. Drew is talking to Howard, and all of a sudden he's getting a bug on his shoulder. He's like, "Oh, get it off, get it off!" Freaks out. Spike ends up getting this bug on his forehead. And he's like, I'm not even paying any real attention because Spike is just so focused on Stu, who's grilling. And Stu is like, "Yeah, I get it that you want one of these burgers, but it's not going to happen, buddy." But eventually, towards the tail end of the episode, like Stu does give Spike some burnt, as much as possible, uh, burgers and whatever. So he does give him something. So Stu goes on to have this camera that is starting to film all these things, of all of these family members, of which that a good portion of them, I'm not even going to bother to state who they all are, because some of them aren't going to be used as frequently as others. Like, we do have, like, Chucky's father in the background, and just some other just side characters that I don't feel that I really want to go on and know who they are, but they're existing within here. And plus, also, some of the characters have also just been in the pilot episode, but don't have any real bearing on this episode, legitimately. So, Tommy, as well as all the other kids, and eventually Angelica kind of joins in with the gang. Tommy is talking to all the kids, and they're thinking about like what they can do to just have fun. And Tommy's like, "Well, hey, like I have this ball. I think he got it from his grandfather, and like it's his favorite toy." I'm like, "Oh my god, like yeah, like this ball became like such a popular thing, a popular like iconic piece for the show, that I think at some point like they went on to try to sell the ball as well. Just every bit of possible merchandise that they could have squeezed out from this thing, but logically, like, do you blame them? So Tommy mentions how like important this ball is to him. So Angelica takes the ball from him and is to have it high above her. Like, "Oh yeah, you're not gonna get this ball." So Angelica is telling Tommy to just be nice and ask for the ball back. And Tommy's like, "No, give me the ball." And Angelica's like, "Well, ask nicely." And Tommy's like, "Give me the ball." So Angelica's like, "Well, Kobe," tosses the ball far, far away within the neighbors' homes. So Tommy starts crying because Angela tossed the ball, or Angelica. So Dee Dee comes to Tommy and is to figure out a way to just kind of lift him up high and kind of do all these kind of fun things to make Tommy stop crying. But then when Dee Dee lifts Tommy up, Tommy realizes, like, "Oh my god, I can see the ball from here." So Tommy goes to the rest of the babies, and he's like, "Okay, guys, I have a plan. Like, we need to get out of here. We need to get to that ball. That's going to be our fun for the day." So Tommy has this kangaroo that has a screwdriver within it, and so he's like, "Okay, this is how I'm going to get ourselves out of this little gate thing and start crawling our way to the fence and open up the fence while Stu is grilling all these burgers." So they get to the neighbor's yard here, and things transpire along the way. We would have Phil that goes into this kind of weird, goofy, uh, like brick like thing, that is to probably be like a smokestack, or some goofy like chimney-ish looking thing. He opens it up and he sticks his head in there to just have a bunch of like dust and smoke all come right at him. And Chucky, who's looking for the ball in the most bizarre place, this little hole, ends up accidentally getting stuck in the hole. So both Phil and Lil are at this little fountain thing, and Tommy's just like, well, hey, like, did you guys find the ball yet? Where the heck is Chucky at? So they find that he's stuck in this hole. And like, what are you doing? He was like, hey, I was looking for the ball. Like, what do you think I was doing? So they have to figure out a way to just kind of shove him out of this hole. So Chucky is now crying at this moment for all the stuff that he's had to just go on and do in this episode. Like, I had to go on and try to find this ball, and I got stuck in this tree. So Tommy is just like, oh yeah, that's all well and good. Well, like, now we have to just go on and just jump over this fence, and like, you guys need to just kind of figure out a way to just kind of hop us over. And so Tommy goes first, Chucky goes second, and Phil and Lil are figuring out like which one is to go next, and they kind of cry and whimper uh, by who is going to legitimately go on next. But Tommy and Chucky make their way over the fence, so they make it to the ball. Then come to find out there is to be a dog there. So they run back to the fence. Tommy has Chucky go over the fence, and then Tommy realizes that he can't figure out a way to get over the fence. So all the rest of the babies just decide to just ditch Tommy, and they just leave. And or no, wait, Chucky stays, but Phil and Lil ditch, and they go back to Betty, and they start crying. And Betty's like, okay, what the heck is going on? And then Dee Dee realizes that Tommy and the rest of the kids are all gone from that gate. So Spike, for whatever reason, is to seemingly be Batman and knows what's going on, and he's to save the day here, as he is to find this weird totem-like uh, face mask that he rushes his way on to this neighborhood house, and is to scare this dog away, and then is to take both Chucky and Tommy on his back and starts jumping over this fence, and they start riding off back into uh, their yard. So Dee Dee finds Tommy, and she's like, "Oh my god, oh there he is." So by the end of this, we have Spike, who's kind of done a good deed for the day, ends up getting some burgers for a reward. Tommy and Spike are to have this really just nice moment here, and we play off with these fireworks. So next up is to be waiter. There's a baby in my soup. Kind of a very goofy episode. So this episode starts with Tommy, who is to have this tie that he's almost going to flush down this toilet. Stu ends up realizing what Tommy's doing, and he's like, "Oh my god, this is my favorite tie." Because again, he just has favorite clothes all the time. Oh, like in the birthday episode, he had two favorite shirts that all end up getting ruined by birthday cakes or just Tommy's food in the very first pilot episode. Forgot a little bit about that. But so Dee Dee is to try to figure out how she can kind of wring out this tie to give back to Stu so he can wear his favorite tie. But his tie is a little ruffled there. So they're also trying to figure out like the babysitter thing because it seems that the babysitter is to call off. So they're like, oh my god, what are we gonna do? And so they're forced to bring Tommy to this restaurant for them to talk to Muckle Honey, this weird uh, toy company guy. So they're making a list of all these people for this babysitter to call, and the babysitter, it seems, is out. And so they're looking at like Grandpa Lou, like, well, hey, Grandpa Lou can just watch over the kid. And Grandpa's like, yeah, I'm sorry, like, I already made this whole plan to go with Louise to go bowling. And so, like, man, like, we're just really out of luck here. So, Stu and Dee Dee go to this diner restaurant to meet with Muckle Honey with Tommy. So, Muckle Honey is playing all these practical jokes on this family. He has this enjoyment buzzer to shake the hand of Stu, and he also shakes the hand of Dee Dee to have his hand just kind of pop off of his arm. Come to find out he has a fake hand. He's like, man, like you guys are just so gullible. And then he has this little sucker, and Tommy tries to grab the sucker, and the sucker just kind of continues to just go on and on and on to where Tommy just gives up on grabbing onto it. So like Muckle Honey is just like, man, like Stu, even your son is just a sucker like you are. So it's like ha 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 ha. So we'd start to get our family to order the food here, and there's to be a phone call coming for Dee Dee from Grandpa Lou, saying it's like, well, hey, like you need to help me just get out of here. Me and Lou just had a falling out, so like you got to help me out, Dee Dee. So Dee Dee has to be forced to leave now. So Stu starts showing these toys off to Muckle Honey, getting very distracted, having Tommy kind of dip underneath this table here. So as Stu is starting to show off these toys that are to uh, be the Helioptitron and the Wacko Specs, whatever those goofy things were. So Tommy takes gum from underneath this table and latches it on to Muckle Honey's feet, and then ties up Stu's shoelaces to the table, and then he goes off to the back of this kitchen. So, because Stewie, I think, latches on to this little uh, like tray like thing that kind of is wheeled to make his way to the kitchen, to the back. So we'd all of a sudden have this like one little plate that just has this little like little thing of fries, and this guy just adds this little garnish, and he thinks that that's okay enough to just kind of put out there. I thought that was kind of funny. But so Tommy gets put in this mixer, and he accidentally just starts spinning around, and he's like, oh my god. So Tommy ends up getting flung into these mashed potatoes, and so he gets out of the mashed potatoes. And there is to all of a sudden be this one chef who's kind of making these pies. And Tommy puts his silverware in it and whipped creams it. And the waiter comes by, he's like, man, like I guess the quality is really dipped in here, but I guess you won't really know how bad that dipping will really be. So Tommy goes on to this soup, and it's to pour in all of these peppers and this hot sauce. And so the chef goes on and is to try the soup to make sure it's right. And he just like is like, oh my god, blah. And so he just I'm sure he hurls. And so the waiter just kind of takes this soup up and just like, okay, all right. So finally Tommy gets into this pasta, and he ends up getting served out there. So Stu and Muckle Honey are going through all of these toys, and Stu is like, hey, I have a million ideas. And Muckle Honey is just like, well, man, yeah, like I'm having the time of my life here. Man, if I could just hire you for the simplest reasons. But it seems like you have some edge, kid. Maybe I can eventually realize that I need to hire you. So Tommy gets back to Stu as Stu is to finally realize that Tommy has been missing. And as Stu is to see the child and with the pus all over him, like Stu realizes, like, man, you must have had a heck of a night too, didn't you? Didn't you, Tommy? So Macaroni tries to soup. He ends up gassing out, like, "Oh my god!" Blah, and he falls over. And then Stu is to try to like help out Muckle Honey, but his shoelaces are tied. He ends up tossing the whole entire table on top of Muckle Honey by accident. And Muckle Honey's like, "Oh my god, did you plan all of this? Did you rib me, sir?" And that's when Muckle Honey's like, "Man, yeah, like definitely. Like, I'm gonna hire you." So they leave the restaurant, and so Tommy ends up throwing this valet like a thing of pasta in his hand, and they walk off. So that's what kind of wraps up this episode to go on to the next, which is At the Movies. Just, oh my god. This episode from like just start to finish, I was like, how is this going to be great? So Tommy is wheeling around this little trinket device. It looks like a vacuum, and all these balls are just kind of bouncing around on it. I know that there's probably a specific name for this toy, and I've probably seen this toy in a number of other projects and never had gone on to legitimately know what the name of it was, and still don't to this day. And at some point, I'll probably come up with that name. Probably. Uh, but I don't even know how to Google it either. If anybody's know actually what this toy's name is, let me know in the comments below, and say that it's the toy that I forgot the name of, so I can go into other projects and be like, oh yeah, this is the name of this thing, but I'll probably still forget it because my life becomes a blur. But anyways, Tommy's going on playing with this little vacuum lawnmower-ish like toy, and he's all of a sudden seeing Reptar being shown on the telly. And he's like, Reptar! And so he goes on to just get closer and closer to the screen. And Reptar is like chewing through this town, busting all the way through it. So Tommy is to be grabbed by Stu and saying like, okay, like tonight's the night that we're going, it's movie night, and we're going to this movie so Tommy can see it. And we come to find out that it's a chintzy film. It really is. Because when they finally get to the movie theater, like Tommy as well is to want to see Reptar and is pitching to the kids to figure out how they can go on and see Reptar. But we're going to this movie theater and seeing two posters: Total Mayhem and The Dummy Bears in the Land Without Smiles. Ugh. So Grandpa Lou is like, man, please tell me that we're going to see something really interesting here. And it's like, no, it's going to be Dummy Bears. And so Grandpa Lou is just like, oh my god, like, I'm going to have to force to be watch something that I just don't really have any real, like brain cells to kill while watching it. So Tommy notices the Reptar poster and he's like, oh my god, Reptar. And he's like, ah. But then Dee Dee grabs him and she hears him saying something, but then she's like, "Oh yeah, rah rah, blah, blah, yeah, whatever you said." So they go into this silly film, the Dummy Bears, and we have these bears that are firing off these bows and arrows, and we then have the title, the Land Without Smiles, and I'm like, okay, this is such a goofy thing. So Tommy pitches to the rest of the kids, we got to figure out where Reptar is. Like, this is the thing that I saw earlier, and we got to see where we can go and watch this movie. So they leave, they go into this exit door, and they're trying to figure out which theater is showing this monster film. So at first they go into this one spot where it's this kissing and loving movie, and they're all kind of crowding the screen and like, hey, down in front. So I think that there are some ushers or somebody trying to sneak in to figure out where these babies are, and the babies go into hiding. So at some point, one of the babies accidentally grabs a leg of one of the people watching this film, and the girl ends up slapping the guy. So the kids make their way to the concession stand, and also Grandpa Lou is going to be there as well because he's like, man, like I'm sick of this movie. At least I need to go on and get some kind of candy so I can like can kind of rationalize that I can kind of like waste some brain cells as well as also like get something good out of this. Because if you go to the movie theater, I always traditionally just get popcorn, and I would probably oftentimes get an icy, but I think the ices have kind of changed now, so that sucks. But yeah, like I don't think I'd ever really get candy at a movie theater because I think just popcorn should just be good enough. But let me know in the comments below what you go on and you have in the movie theater if you watch this far into the video because I'm getting really late into the thing here. So concession stand. We have these two guys that are talking about these skateboards and weird goofy names for them like beanie boards and blah 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 boards, and like they're just having this bickering back and forth of things that make no sense. So while they're distracted, Tommy ends up dipping himself into the popcorn machine, and both Phil and Lil are playing around with this soda machine, and they're kind of hitting the things, and the soda is eventually gonna uncontrollably just go everywhere. Chucky ends up just starting to grab all these candy bars and just eating them, and we just see the smear of just chocolate all over his face. So at some point, the concession stand guys are just kind of bickering back and forth about a manager position. So all the kids eventually realize that they need to leave these concessions and make their way to the uh, the room that they are to have the film reels. Like I know there's actually a word for it. I'm kind of coming up with it at the top of my tongue here. I know it's there. The projectionists, the projectors, whatever that word actually is. So the babies are making their way to these projectors, which, funny enough, like this is to showcase the times that there's actually reels that are coming out when actually like the movies are actually done more currently in digital, so there wouldn't be this kind of setup, but it's all just to be forced to be presented the way it is. So we'd have the babies who are looking at all these film reels, and they're pulling them apart, and that starts to destroy every single one of the movies to where the whole entire room is filling up with all of these reels. So our characters are going on and watching this film where this little girl and these dummy bears, like it seems that they find out that this girl is getting sick, and the dummy bear doctor is like looking in on her. And so Stu is almost in tears, like, oh my god, like this little girl, what are they gonna do? So finally the babies start to find the Reptar movie and they're starting to watch it. And Phil is trying to figure out how he can go on and see it and eventually get a little spot where he can watch this film. But then they start to get distracted by these film reels, and so they sit on these things that are rotating and spinning around, and they're having a lot of fun with it. But so all the film ends up getting distorted and jostled around, and leaves these babies to just get out of here. Because then also the projectionist is looking like, oh my god, all these reels. So the babies leave, and we have Grandpa Lou that's like, oh my god, like you guys are horrible at this concession stand. Like I knew a person that used to work in a concession stand, and they used to walk 15 miles to get to there, and this is 15 miles, I tell you. So Grandpa Lou re-meets back up with the babies and is like, okay, hey guys, we got to get out of here. We got to get back to our movie that's horrible. So they see what is to seemingly be the very end of the movie because it just stops. So afterwards, they're just kind of forced to uh, kind of leave the theater because nothing else is showing because all the films were all ruined. So they drive off and they realize that they probably had a really good time. Tommy ends up seeing a reptar statue in the background. It's like, oh my god, and they just kind of drive away here. So the next episode is to be, or the next part of this, and the last bit of this is to actually be Slumber Party. So Dee Dee and Stu are with Tommy in his room, and they're talking to Tommy about like, hey, you're gonna have this slumber party. It's gonna be great. And we really start to realize in this episode they try to minimize how many people are in this episode because Angelica is showing up, Tommy's showing up, and they just kind of carry this whole episode. So Tommy is hearing from his parents about this slumber party. He's like, what is a slumber party? So Angelica shows up the door with Drew again. So they make their way into this home, and Angelica is looking at Tommy. It's like, oh, well, you have a bottle. Like, if anything, like, don't you want to grow up and get a real, get a real cup? Like, come on, baby. Like, don't be drinking that bottle. So Dee Dee goes on to take Tommy, and Angelica is again mentioning how like, hey, I know this is your house and all, but like with this slumber party, like I want dibs on the bed. So like just very much copy like the pilot episode. So Dee Dee sets Tommy down. It's like, okay, get your rest, Tommy. And Angelica's in this bed. And she's kind of smacking the pillows. So Dee Dee leaves, and so Tommy ends up asking Angelica. It's like, well, hey, like, what's a slumber party? And Angelica tells Tommy, it's like, well, hey, like, if you really need to ask, like you obviously like shouldn't. But so, or it's like if you really want to know, like you shouldn't be really needing to want to know because you should easily know. So they turn off the lights to get to try to everybody to go to sleep here, but Angelica, it seems, is to be just very hot, so she opens this window. But then all of a sudden, like Tommy is to get a little cold, and Angelica is to even be cold, but she's probably just wanting to just figure out a way to just make Tommy's life a living misery. So the following morning, Dee Dee, Angelica, and Tommy are all sitting around at this table, and it seems Tommy is just having a runny nose, and Dee Dee is realizing that Tommy is sick. So she's like, well, you know what? I think you just need to rest. Like, you're a little sick there, Tommy, so let's put you back into bed. So all of a sudden, this episode starts to turn into like Akira or something, like some warped thing going on here. And I was like, what the heck is going on here? So Tommy all of a sudden is to be in his room, and all of a sudden the crib ends up turning into like a thing that's two sizes bigger this day. And all of a sudden this little like clown stick thing is just kind of rocking back and forth and very weird thing. That's like, we're gonna get to some pretty cougar levels of weird going on here. All of a sudden, like Tommy's like just sucking off this bottle, and Angelica's head appears on the bottle, and she again touts about how, like, hey, like, baby, don't have this bottle. So that's not worse. Frickin' Tommy all of a sudden sees Dee Dee, and she's all of a sudden this moon. She's like a crescent moon, and she comes in there, and she's like, hey, like, Tommy, you don't look so hot. And so she touches him. It's like, oh my god, like, I think he's running a fever. So Stu comes in, and he, like, becomes this cloud. Grandpa Lou comes in, and he becomes this plane. Drew comes in, he's the star. I'm like, what the heck is going on? What are all these weird visuals in this episode? So they're all, like, very concerned about Tommy. So, of course, classic Dee Dee goes into lip shits, and it's like, well, maybe we should call the doctor. It's like, no, like, I think, like, he just kind of needs to just kind of work through this. So the Stu and Dee Dee both sing a song to Tommy, hoping that can kind of just soothe him. And Angelica is, like, looking at Tommy, and Tommy just, Pah! And Angelica's like, oh my god, like, you just ruined my clothes that I have a billion of, it seems, just never ending, the same wardrobe. So Grandpa Lou is going on and talking about applesauce, that could just be the cure to Tommy's ills. And so they go on, and they put Tommy into rest, and they hope that that's going to work the best for him. So he wakes up the next morning, and they look in at Tommy, and they're just like, all right, like, it seems that he's okay. So they then go on to have, like, Grandpa Lou, who's talking about applesauce, is like, now I have a hankering for pancakes and applesauce. And they're just like, okay, like I guess we're just gonna have to weirdly have applesauce now. I never liked applesauce. I never really did. Like, I think at some point, like, people worked it into a pie, and I could just kind of deal with that. But, like, ugh, just never a pleasing meal to have. I'd rather go on and have anything else. But so by the end of this, we again have, I think, Tommy asking Angelica, it's like, what was a slumber party? And, like, man, if this is to go on and legitimately be what a slumber party is, like, maybe I never want to have one again. So Angelica ends up opening up Tommy's crib. It's like, yeah, I never saw anybody throw up as much as you've ever done. And so they kind of have this little bit of rapport between the two of them. But again, that's going to probably mean nothing for past episodes. But that's how things just kind of play out within this one. So with that said, I'm going to try to get the heck out of here because I know how long this is taking. I didn't get to any little. There was maybe little things here and there, but I really just kind of straightforward, just try to rush through, get this done because I realized how much I talked in the very beginning of this. So, with that said, yeah, I really did enjoy these episodes. There are some fun bits and pieces about them. That movie one, though, was just hands down the best one out of all because it easily won me over. I was biased about it, as I've already said that. Nothing else comes to mind. I think it just really needs to have me just stop all this and get this out there so I can have a video for today. Thank you for watching this. Thank you for going on and choosing this through the community things. Subscribe to otherwise. Hope that I'm going to probably figure out another list of things that I already have in my back pocket, or legitimately whatever comes to mind within the days of which that I'm to go on and continue uploading videos, and hope that this channel does well because of it. But also realize how lopsided all these videos are, so man, I'm going to be crushed for however some of these actually do. But anyways, it's all the roll of the dice. I'm going to get out of here. Goodbye, everybody. Bye, everybody.